Good evening, everybody. It's 5:29 right now, and we will be starting this presentation in about 1 minute. We will see if anyone else joins us. Okay, it is 5:30, so we will get started. Welcome, everybody, tonight to the Public Information Meeting for US 380. This is a virtual meeting, so before we get started, I want to remind everybody to please mute your microphones if it's not already muted, and to turn off your camera for you to get increased bandwidth. During the presentation, you can type comments in the chat feature, and there will be opportunities to speak at the end. So you should have this symbol on your Zoom. The chat would be here. Click that, and it'll allow you to then enter any questions or comments you have during the presentation and after the presentation. Also want to remind everybody that a PDF version of this presentation is located on the project website, which can be found here, or you can also go to the NMDOT website and you'll be able to go to this project and pick up that information at that time. So with that, we are going to get started with our presentation.
Good evening, everybody. We're here for the first public information meeting for the US 380 corridor between Roswell and the Texas state line. This is the New Mexico Department of Transportation control number 2100740. In our presentation, we're going to go through several items, including introduction, project overview, a description of the existing conditions analysis, the study process, and then we're going to give you opportunity to provide input, and we will turn it over to live questions and conclusions at the end. First, let us have some welcoming remarks from our district engineer, Tim Parker.
Good evening. My name is Timothy Parker, and I am your District 2 engineer for Southeastern New Mexico Department of Transportation. And thank you for taking some of your time to be with us here this evening. This US 380 project that will be described this evening is something that for the last 5.5 years we have had on our list of unfunded regionally significant projects. The project itself, needing passing lanes on US 380 from Roswell to the state line of Texas through Tatum, the traffic has been increasing every year. And in fact, road conditions are growing and becoming quite the safety concern. Continually through the week, it's very common to see lines and lines, caravans of vehicles, maybe even over a mile long at times, going one direction, coming from Texas or going to Texas, and various places beyond. Very common occurrence, but it also makes it very unsafe to pass, and many find an inability to pass, which creates the safety concern as people become impatient and make bad decisions when it comes to passing. And there have been many, many near misses, and many folks gone off the roadway because someone else made a poor driving decision that day. But yes and true, some of these passing events have turned fatal. Oil and gas, agriculture, renewable energy, tourism, school buses, mail carriers, ambulances, food carriers, and other freight industries are currently utilizing US 380. Thank you for your help and your attention this evening to make this project a priority project for Southeastern New Mexico through your letters, through speaking with your elected officials, and thank you for your time this evening.
And now I'm going to turn it over to AJ Romero, who is our New Mexico Department of Transportation Project Development Engineer, for introductions. AJ?
Good evening, everybody. My name is AJ Romero. I'm your project development engineer representing the Department of Transportation on this project. The study team consists of the following people: we have Tim Parker, we just heard from, PE, District Engineer, District 2. Francisco Sanchez, PE, Assistant DE of Engineering Support. Alan Briley, Assistant DE for Construction Engineering. Of course, I just introduced myself. Michael Smelker, PE, South Region Design Manager. Trent Bodkins, he's representing our department environmental section. He's a natural resources section supervisor. And Jennifer Mullins, who's our environmental specialist on this project. Our consultant team is represented by Bohannon Houston, who is the prime consultant. Their team consists of WSP, Parametrics, and Horrocks. And our project manager representing the consultant team is Albert Thomas, PE, with Bohannon Houston. Project overview. The project will commence at mile marker 158 and will proceed east and end at mile marker 242, which is at the Texas state line, which is over 80 miles. The project purpose is to identify and address any existing deficiencies that might exist within the corridor with the considerations of safety, operations, access, right-of-way, environmental, your public input, and costs associated with any alternatives. Project deliverables, what we're going to end up on this project is a report with any recommended improvements to the US 380 corridor.
Thank you, AJ. I'm going to talk a little bit about the existing conditions analysis that we've conducted for this project. I'll start by taking a look at the existing roadway. Many of you probably know this corridor better than us, but we have traveled this roadway and we have identified this 2-lane road as a rural roadway with 12-foot driving lanes in each direction, 6 to 10-foot shoulders, and then of course the pavement tapers on the outside, which provide for a safety zone. There is one section from between milepost 162 and 164 that is a 1 mile long passing zone for eastbound traffic. And then there is a 4-lane section through the community of Tatum. This has 2 driving lanes in each direction, separated by a 5-foot painted median, and has curb and gutter and sidewalk on the outsides. As we looked at this corridor, we took a look specifically at the horizontal alignment. And this is the summary of the analysis that was conducted. We evaluated the route to determine how it meets current criteria for the design speed that we're hoping on this project. There are 31 horizontal curves in the study area. And with the exception of 2 of them, all of them meet the design speed or the posted speed for the corridor. The 2 that do not are highlighted in pink here. Let's take a closer look at those. The first one is located between milepost 231 and milepost 232. It has a current radius of 6,489 feet with a super elevation of 2.5%. This complies with the design speed criteria for 60 miles an hour. This area can be corrected by increasing the super elevation rate and will not require any type of realignment at this location. The second curve that is below the posted speed is horizontal curve number 30, which is near the Texas state line. It's located between milepost 241 and 242. It has a current radius of 4,710 feet with a super elevation of 2.3%, which results in a design speed of about 45 miles per hour. This one might be correctable by actually increasing the super elevation rate, but it also may require realignment of the road to straighten it out at this location. We will look at both these options as we start developing improvement alternatives for the project. The next area that we looked at was the existing vertical alignment. And this is a little bit overwhelming, but there's 266 vertical curves in the corridor. 11 are insufficient for 70 miles per hour because they restrict passing sight distance. Those are the ones we've highlighted in red on this table. Because it's difficult to read, we've summarized those locations into one table that only shows the areas of concern. These are the 11 that we've identified having substandard passing sight distance. In those areas, they result in a maximum design speed that ranges from 35 miles per hour up to 60 miles per hour. Many of those areas are already being handled by striping with solid yellow center stripe to restrict passing. The more critical safety concern is the vertical alignment that does not have adequate stopping sight distance. Those areas are shown in the second column. There are only 2 locations where stopping sight distance is obstructed and the vertical alignment is less than the posted speed. Again, as we start developing improvement alternatives, we'll be taking a look at the stopping sight distance and trying to correct those vertical deficiencies as part of our project improvements. The next area that we looked at is the intersection sight distance. All access points have adequate sight distance except for 5 intersection locations, which are identified here. Let's take a look at each one of those in a little bit more detail. This is the one at Arlene Road, which is located near milepost 16, between milepost 163 and 164. What we're looking at is on this intersection, if you come to this intersection and try to access US 380, you would have to take a look to the right-hand side to be able to see oncoming traffic as you make a left turn out of this access point onto 380. With that, this has a deficient sight distance because the hill that on the vertical curve blocks the view for you being able to see far enough in advance to accelerate up to the 55-mile-an-hour speed to get in front of that traffic. The other movement is going with a right-hand turn coming out of this. With that, you would look to the left. And again, because of the vertical curvature, we have a blocked sight distance. Therefore, you have difficulty getting up to speed when you make a right-hand turn before you're overtaken by oncoming traffic. The next intersection is near milepost 173. This is at Elliott Road. This one only has passing sight distance in one direction that is deficient. And that is if you're coming out of this intersection, wanting to make a right-hand turn, or if you're coming out of this section to make a left-hand turn, looking to the left, you're obstructed by the vertical curvature and are not able to see traffic that is coming to you from the Roswell area towards this intersection. The other direction has plenty of sight distance. The third intersection is at a gravel road located near milepost 175. This one again has a sight distance issue, this time coming from the west direction. You can see the deficient sight distance for the vertical curve looking towards the west. The fourth is at a private drive, which is located near between milepost 199 and milepost 200. If you're coming out of this intersection, there's a vertical curve that obstructs your view as you're looking back to the east to be able to make a left-hand turn out of this intersection. The last one is just adjacent to it at Tower Road. So coming from the south on Tower Road, this one actually has the sight distance again obstructed to the left or coming from the Roswell area. And so it would make it difficult to get a left turn out or to make a right turn maneuver out of this intersection. All of these intersection sight distance will be looked at as part of our improvement alternatives to identify how we would mitigate this and make these intersections safer. Although this is not truly an intersection, another area that we will be looking at is the Waldrop Rest area. We have received feedback that this location causes some confusion for the unfamiliar drivers. And in driving it myself, I did notice a level of discomfort as I was traveling through here. There's nothing really wrong with the existing signing and striping, but we will review this existing layout to determine if there are any signing or striping improvements that we can recommend to provide some better direction for drivers at this location. Our team also reviewed traffic volumes for the corridor and conducted an operational analysis of the existing 2-lane road to determine if there is adequate capacity. As you can see from this table, there are 6 distinct segments in this corridor where traffic volumes change based on major intersections along the corridor. Near the beginning of the project limits, just outside of Roswell, the daily traffic volumes are approximately 3,000 vehicles per day Towards the middle of the project limits, they reduced down to approximately 2,000 vehicles per day. Then at the east end of the corridor, near the Texas state line, the daily volumes are approximately 2,500 vehicles per day. We also estimated traffic volumes that are expected in 20 years. So the column on the right, you can see the projected traffic for the year 2040. There's 4,000 vehicles per day expected near Roswell and a little over 3,000 vehicles per day near the Texas state line. Using this information, we performed a capacity analysis of the existing two-lane road. In order to complete that analysis, we utilized the peak hour traffic volumes, which are shown in the second set of columns on this table. The highest hourly volume for the corridor occurs between Tatum and the Texas state line, 441 vehicles today, with it growing to approximately 600 vehicles by the year 2040. For this link in the corridor, the capacity analysis resulted in a level of service B for both the existing and the 24 traffic projection volumes. The rest of the corridor is a level of service A. What this is telling us is the two-lane rural road typical section has adequate capacity for both the existing traffic and will still continue to operate acceptably with the projected 20-year traffic volumes. We don't have any capacity issues on this highway. The other analysis our team conducted was a safety analysis. This starts with an assessment of the existing crashes that have occurred within the project corridor limits. The NMDOT has crash data for the years 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018 that they were able to provide to us. We took a look at the statistics for crash types, frequency, and severity. We looked at where these crashes are occurring and are there any trends that we can use to identify potential problem areas. I'm going to show you some exhibits of these analyses. The other thing that we've done is to evaluate the crash data using methodologies from the Highway Safety Manual. As we move forward with the development of alternatives, we will use predictive crash analysis to estimate the expected reduction in crashes based on the improvements that we consider. This summary shows the crash rates for the 6 segments of the corridor. The highest crash rate is the section that is closest to Roswell, just west of the 409 intersection. Even though this crash rate is 111.9 crashes per million vehicle miles traveled, it is less than the statewide average of 159.5 and less than the countywide averages. The other segments of the corridor are lower, and the overall average for this 84-mile corridor is 52.2 crashes per million vehicle miles traveled. Even though these crash rates are not high when compared to other crash rates, there are some characteristics that drew our attention. One of the things we looked at is where these crashes are occurring. This is a heat map that shows where the crashes are concentrated. The corridor hotspot is near milepost 160, which is just east of Roswell. The other areas in pink are other hotspots along the corridor that we will continue reviewing a little closer as we develop our alternatives. The other factors we want to review are the crash types. This table shows the different crash types by year and summarizes what percentage of overall crashes for each of these types. The highest is animal-related crashes. This contributes to 33% of the overall crashes in the corridor. Rollover crashes are at 23%, and 11% of the crashes were head-on crashes. Another statistic that everyone is concerned about is crashes related to DWI. In this corridor, 9% of all of the crashes were due to impaired driving. 14% of the rollover crashes were a result of driving while impaired. As we look at the animal crashes, this map shows where the animal crashes occurred within the corridor. The majority of these animal crashes involved deer, and most of them took place during dark conditions. But as you can see by the highlighted pink areas, there are a few concentrated areas that need to be looked at. As you compare the animal crashes on this corridor, which were at 33%, this is much higher than the statewide average and the county averages when you look at the crashes that are associated with animals crossing the roadway. One of the other items that we looked at is rollover crashes. Again, the areas in pink highlight where the concentration of those rollovers occurred. Some of the top contributing factors included defective tires, driver inattention, alcohol or drug involvement, and excessive speeds. The rollover hotspot that really caught our eye was at milepost 200, which corresponds with the horizontal curve that doesn't meet the design guidelines. Again, 23% of the crashes in this corridor are rollover crashes, which is much higher than the statewide average of 1.1%. The other item we look at is where these crashes occur relative to the passing and no passing zones. This map shows where those crashes occurred when people were making poor choices in terms of passing at these different locations. When this happens, the crash types usually result in either head-ons or side swipes for the vehicles traveling in the same directions, and sometimes even leads to rollovers caused by these types of accidents. So we'll continue looking at these areas to see if there's any improvements that we can do to try to minimize the illegal passing or poor passing decisions made by the travelers. With the crash analysis, we also take a look at the severity of the crashes. As you can see from this chart, there was 7 fatalities that occurred over that 4-year period. There was 39 injury-related crashes, and then the remaining 77 were only property damage and didn't involve injury or fatalities. So if you look at the fatal crash, that's 5.7% of the crashes were fatal crashes, much higher than the statewide average or the county averages. The idea is to try to figure out how to improve this corridor to eliminate fatalities and to reduce the number of crashes and injury-related crashes. In summary, there are some safety issues within the corridor that we will try to mitigate with improvements. We will focus on these areas that are shown by the hotspots along the corridor. There also seem to be some correlation between the inability of traffic wanting to pass, and when they can't pass safely, there is a potential for head-on crashes, sideswipe crashes, and possibly rollover crashes. There seems to be a higher incident of animal crashes than we see on other corridors. So we'll take a look at these different factors in these different locations where these crashes are occurring as we develop all alternatives. This map summarizes where some of the key safety areas are along the corridor. These areas will be the areas we will focus on as we develop our alternatives. The other item that we look at is whether or not the existing bridge structures need any improvements. The only bridge structure on this project is at the Pecos River. The existing bridge has a sufficiency rating of 85 out of 100, which means the bridge is in good condition. We have identified a few maintenance items that are needed on the bridge, but other than that, there are no problems with this existing structure. We have also completed an inventory of the existing drainage structures that cross under the highway. There are 124 drainage structures in this corridor. 84 of them are culvert pipes, ranging in size from 24 inches up to 48 inches. There are 31 concrete box culvert, and there are 8 major structures, which are a combination of multi-barrel concrete box culverts or multi-plate corrugated metal pipes. And as I mentioned, there is the one bridge structure over the Pecos River. Most of these structures are in good condition. Most of the culverts have concrete blankets. Some of the larger culverts have safety grates. There is evidence of minimal silt, sedimentation, or debris in almost all of the culvert crossings. We are in the process of reviewing them for corrosion, but do not expect corrosion to be an issue in this corridor. There is one concrete box culvert located between mileposts 218 and 219, which seems to be primarily used for livestock crossing and is not for drainage purposes. The topography in the corridor is flat, with the land cover consisting of small brush and grasses. The terrain is relatively flat with playas that may detain some of the flows from continuing downstream. Our team also started researching the existing utilities along the corridor. This is the list of the current utility owners within the corridor limits. We have contacted utility owners to request records of the existing utilities and will be evaluating these utilities for any potential conflicts as we start developing our alternatives. Here are some of the facts of the existing utility research. In the areas around Roswell and Tatum, we see more utilities than in the rest of the corridor. Typical utilities such as water, sewer, electrical And then there's also some fiber optic communication lines within those areas. In the rural areas of the corridor, there are communication lines and electrical lines that parallel the roadway, but most of them are located outside of the edges of the roadway near the right-of-way lines. There is evidence of petroleum and natural gas pipelines that cross the highway, and these crossings are scattered throughout the project length. If any of the alternatives have the potential to impact any of these utilities, we will work with the utility owners to identify those impacts and the potential for relocation of their facilities if needed. Now let me talk a little bit about the existing environmental conditions. There is approximately 3 acres of wetlands located in the study area, in and around the Pecos River. Outside of this wetland and riparian habitat, the area is characterized by Chihuahuan desert grasslands, Shinery oak, sands, and grassland prairies. This ecosystem provides habitat for over 52 observed species of invertebrates, 3 fish, 5 reptiles, 44 birds, and 14 mammals, as well as over 250 different plant types. Despite this diversity of habitat, there is no designated critical habitat within the project area for species protected by the Endangered Species Act. We do not anticipate any of our alternatives to be impacting these natural resources, but a more detailed evaluation will be conducted in the next phase of this project. There are 10 archaeological sites that were identified within the project area, including prehistoric sites dating from 700 to 1400 AD, as well as historic ranching sites and other historic buildings, and features such as irrigation canals and bridges. All of these resources will either be avoided by the project or will undergo archaeological excavation prior to construction. Additional consideration include the substantial amount of BLM and state land office land located throughout the project area. In addition, the Bitter Lake National Wildlife Refuge and Mescalero Sands Recreation Area are located adjacent to the project. There will be no need to impact these areas as a result of the project, and a categorical exclusion is the anticipated level of analysis that we feel will be required for the National Environmental Policy Act documentation. That concludes our finding for the existing conditions. Now let me talk about the process we are following for this corridor study. The study is being conducted in accordance with the NMDOT location study procedures, which were developed to comply with the NEPA requirements. The study process includes an initial evaluation of alternatives, a detailed evaluation of alternatives, and an environmental investigation. We are at the beginning of this process. We have just finished the evaluation of existing conditions and are going to start look at development of potential improvement alternatives. We still have to complete the detailed engineering evaluation and the environmental analysis before we can tell you what proposed improvements will be for this US 38 corridor. I also want to point out this process includes continual public involvement through a comprehensive public outreach program from the start through the finish. The study process is only a portion of the overall development project. As you can see from the diagram on the right, once the evaluation of alternatives is complete, we still need to complete the environmental documentation, preliminary design, and final design before the NMDOT can start any construction on this corridor. As shown by the blue highlighted circle, and as I mentioned previously, we are in the Phase A stage of this development, which is known as the initial evaluation of alternatives. The NMDOT and our team want you, the public, to be part of this process since the very beginning. We want your input and your feedback during every step of the way. We have presented you this evening with our assessment of the existing conditions. We want your input on our analysis. Do you agree with our findings? Are there other items we should consider? Is there anything we missed that you have observed as you drive the corridor? We want this input because our next step is to start the evaluation of alternatives, which is shown as Phase B in this process chart. Some of the alternatives that we're going to be looking at include the addition of passing lanes at critical areas along the corridor, the possibility of maybe a Super 2 highway which is essentially a widening of the existing two-lane to allow for continuous passing in either one direction or the other. And then possibly a four-lane highway, which provides 2 lanes of travel in each direction. We'll be looking at these alternatives as well as some other possibilities to look at the pros and the cons of each of the alternatives to determine the benefits of each and to determine which is the most prudent alternative to build and the one that will most feasibly address the concerns and mitigate the issues in this corridor. If you have any ideas that you want us to consider, we want to hear from you. After we conduct our evaluation of alternatives, we will again bring our finding and results back to you through yet another public information meeting similar to this one to get your comments. And once your comments are addressed and we recommend an acceptable alternative, we will start on the preliminary and final design and work with the NMDOT on the development of the plans for implementing the proposed improvements. Here is an overview of the schedule and the next steps. We are done with the evaluation of the existing conditions. We are starting on the evaluation of alternatives, and we'll be done with that in a couple of months. We will have a draft report ready for review by the end of the year, and an environmental document a couple of months after that. For the next steps, we will take the next couple of weeks to gather comments provided by you, the public, as well as other key project stakeholders. We will complete the evaluation of alternatives and the environmental investigations. And then, as I mentioned previously, we will hold a second public information meeting sometime around the end of the year or the first part of next year. Once a preferred alternative is selected, we will begin the preliminary and the final design. Depending on the level improvements identified, the preliminary and final design could take anywhere from 6 to 12 months, and then the DOT will be ready to take the project to construction. The goal of the NMDOT is to have some construction activity starting in this corridor next summer, if at all possible. And now the next thing is to hear from you, the public. There are several ways you can provide your input. You can go to the website and provide us with your comments. The website allows you to provide us with your input, and it also has an interactive map feature that you can use to provide your comments and your feedback on the corridor. Another option is to send us an email at us380@bhinc.com. Or you can call us at the number listed here, or you can send us comments via mail at the address listed on this slide. We want your input. You have an opportunity to provide your feedback at tonight's public information meeting. You will also have another opportunity to provide input at the second public meeting that will occur in a few months. And we will be meeting with the agencies and project stakeholders to get their input as well. Our goal is to establish and maintain a consistent flow and exchange of information. We do that through the project website, the interactive project map, and by providing you with the contact information to solicit open communication between you and our team. We want to get your feedback and your input through the study development because your input helps make our design for this corridor better. That concludes our presentation, and now we will take your comments and answer any questions you might have. To provide input, type your comments in the chat box, raise your hand in Zoom to speak, or if you are on the phone, we will ask if you have comments or questions to share, or you can text your questions to 505-980-6065. Thank you.
All right. That concludes our presentation. And now the next step is to open it up to questions and comments. And with that, we will be taking information from you tonight in several different ways. One is by typing your comments in the chat box. Again, on your Zoom screen, you should have an icon that looks similar to this. And if you click on the chat, then you'll be able to give us your comments through that chat box. The other way is to raise your hand in Zoom to speak, and that's located within the Participants tab. Or if you're on the phone, we will give you an opportunity to speak as well. We will ask you if you have any comments or questions to share over the phone. If you're on the phone, you can also text your questions to 505-980-6065, and Denise will be working to watch for those text messages so that we can answer your questions or get your comments live. I also want to remind everybody that this is being recorded. And so if you do speak up tonight, you will be on the recording that will be posted onto the website. The other option that I wanted to mention is you always have the ability to go to the website and post your information either by going to the website through this URL, or you can always use your camera on your phone to do the QR code, and that'll get you to the website as well. On that website, we have the interactive map. The other option, again, is to email us or to call us and either speak with us directly or leave us a voicemail if we don't happen to answer at the time. Or you can always send us something through mail at our Bohannon Houston office in Albuquerque. So with that, I will turn it over to Denise and see if we have any comments or questions.
I was going to say, and I'm going to interject really quickly too, it would be really helpful to us if you could put your name and email in the chat box. It's hard to do a sign-in sheet on a virtual meeting. And that way we have your contact information so we can continue to share with you when the next public meeting is or any other updates that we want to share. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be really helpful.
Thank you, Denise.
Mm-hmm.
So at this time, I do not see anything in the chat box. Is there anybody on that would like to raise their hand and speak? Once you raise your hand, then we will unmute you. So we have Mr. Parker.
Just a quick question on the traffic analysis. What days of the week was that taken, or was that over the course of a 5-day week?
That was the weekday traffic. And so what we do is we take a look at the annual average daily traffic, and it's monitored through the DOT system. And then it's averaged to a typical daily traffic volume. And so what you were seeing there is the weekday traffic volumes. There will be seasonal peaks. There will be weekend peaks sometimes, depending on the time of the day or the season, that may differ slightly from those, but those are the average daily traffics.
May I also add that the average daily traffic counts were taken pre-COVID, before the shutdown, so we can get a more realistic feel of the traffic on the roadway.
Thank you, AJ, that's correct. All right, Denise, would you like to go to the people on the phone and see if we have anybody on the phone that would like to speak?
Sure. We have the phone number that ends in 6700. It's hard to know. Again, there's no names, but if you would like to speak, I can unmute you and give you a chance. You are now unmuted. Actually, Bert, you might have to unmute. I'm not sure why it's not letting me. So.
Okay, I will try it from my end. And it does not seem to be allowing us to unmute. 6700 is Louis Nahar in Roswell, and he has no comments, Denise.
Thanks.
Thanks, Louis.
And I'm sure if you did, you would share them, so I'm not worried.
All right.
That seems to be the only telephone we have on right now.
Very good. Seeing no hands, I would like to recognize that we have the mayor from Tatum on, Marilyn Burns. Ms. Mayor, I was going to unmute you if you'd like to say anything regarding the project. Denise, are you able to unmute?
No, we're gonna unmute everyone for right now.
Okay, the only thing I have to say is I'm one of the ones that go on that Roswell Road that's been pushed off the road a few times. And basically what happens, it'll be 2 cars in front of a semi and 3 cars behind a semi. And the last car decides it's gonna pass without realizing there are 2 cars in front of that semi. So I have to get off the road.
Yes, yes, ma'am. And there is quite a few times, as District Engineer Tim Parker mentioned, that those lines will back up much as a mile long. When I was on the corridor doing my research, there was one time that line was almost 1.5 miles long. And you're exactly right. People get impatient and they try to pass. And so that is one of the things we're looking at, and one of the reasons that we're looking at the option of adding additional passing lanes, possibly as much as every 5 to 7 miles in each direction, and to try to alleviate some of those passing situations that are occurring there today. Thank you, Ms. Mayor. And thank you for joining us tonight. All right.
I don't see any other hands. Thank you for those that are putting your names and emails in the chat box. That's very helpful to us. If you do know people who were unable to join this evening, we'll post a recording of this on the project website as well. So feel free to send your friends and neighbors to that project website, and they can watch it later if they'd like. Oh, here's one question, Bert.
Okay.
Will there be a review of traffic during weekend travel? Weekends often have Ruidoso travelers.
And that looks like possibly from the city councilor, Councilor Stubbs. So the analysis for the detailed evaluation of alternatives, that is something that we can take a look at. Right now, it is difficult to get that information because, as Mr. Romero pointed out, the restrictions are not giving us true travel patterns of what is going on. Our hope is that we will get those restrictions lifted before our study is complete. And if we do that, then we will be able to then take a look at counting the weekend travelers and taking that information into consideration as we start developing our alternatives analysis. If it is not, if we're not able to do current counts on the weekend, we will reach back to the DOT to see if they have any historical data prior to COVID that identifies if there's any weekend peaks that we need to consider. I do know that from doing a recent study in the village of Ruidoso, their patterns, their travel patterns between the month of April and the month of August showed a 60% difference. And so their August month was much higher than their April month. And so we actually made some adjustments for some studies that we did in the village of Ruidoso because of that. So thank you for that input. And as I said, we will see if we can gather data to show what those weekend peaks are compared to our average daily traffic. Okay. I am not seeing any additional hands being raised or any additional comments. So with that, I think we will go ahead and sign off. It's almost 6:15. And again, The information will be on the website, and you can continue to give us comments. We would like to get as much comments between now and the end of September, so the next couple of weeks, so we can use that as we start developing our alternatives. However, we will allow you to continue providing comments throughout the duration of our study. So even if you don't get your comments in within the next 2 weeks, you will continue to have opportunities to provide us your feedback as we develop our findings and recommendations of the alternatives analysis. So thank you, everybody. AJ, I want to thank you, and I will turn it over to you to see if you have any closing comments on behalf of the department.
Thank you, Bert. I'd like to thank everybody for attending tonight's virtual public meeting. As Bert had mentioned, your response means a lot. If you can, please respond. If you have questions, please ask them. If you have any comments or suggestions, please do so. With the lines of communication listed on your screen. I'd like to go ahead and also say to Bert and to Denise and to the rest of the design team, good job, guys. Thank you very much. You guys rocked on this meeting. That's all I have.
Thank you. With that, we will close our meeting. Everybody, please have a good evening and stay safe. Bye.